Hello, I'm Beth Joey and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, welcome. This is a channel where I paint my face, turn my camera on, and talk about some books. If you've seen my recent video, top 5 fantasy recommendations, then you probably know what to expect from this one, which is the same thing, but for romance. Basically, I never felt like in the past I'd read enough books or had enough expertise or anything to give any recommendations to you guys, but now I feel like I've read more than what is standardly popular, and I feel like I've read a bit of different stuff that I might be able to actually recommend some stuff that maybe you haven't read before, and so that's exactly what I'm going to be doing in this video. So let's crack straight into the 5 books. These are not in any order or anything. They are just 5 books that I would definitely recommend that you pick up. The first one is The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels by India Holton. This is such an entertaining, fun read. And it follows Cecilia Bassingthwaighte, who is living in Victorian London, and she is a proper Victorian young lady, but she is also a pirate. Determined to prove herself and to become part of the esteemed Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels, Cecilia is forced to team up with the man who just so happens to be attempting to assassinate her, Ned Lightbourne, who is not only employed by her aunt's rival to assassinate her, but also seemingly by the Queen to eliminate her and by her father to kidnap her, all through multiple identities. But she's forced to team up with him as the Wisteria Society ladies are put in peril by Captain Morvath, who is also Cecilia's father, and attempt to steal back the flying houses that Captain Morvath has stolen. Does this sound crazy to you? Because it is. But along the way, Cecilia must decide if she would rather kill Ned like he's trying to kill her, or fall in love with him like he seems to be doing for her too. So why do I recommend this book? Because from my blurb, it probably sounds like it's manic and crazy and confusing, but also kind of hilarious, and I would argue that it is all of those things, but in the best possible way. The main reason why I recommend this book is because the writing is used as this perfect tool to show the contradictions between the sort of polite Victorian society and what it's like to be a young woman in that society, and all the rules and everything that surround that, and how that so contradicts with the life of a pirate, which is also incredibly important to these women. It shows how these women care equally about what time you're supposed to have tea and the number of people you are supposed to invite to a dinner party so that the numbers are even, as much as they care about robbing a bank and having a hit put on you being a rite of passage. At the end of the day, all of the characters in this story are incredibly morally grey because of those contradictions, but the way the story sort of uncovers good and evil through these such morally grey characters by going into their motivations, I think is really important to understanding who you're supposed to root for and who is the bad guy. And I have to admit, the feminist in me loves that in this society, in this world that these women have created, men are kind of seen as incompetent and bumbling around with the tail between the legs and the head on the floor, not really knowing what they're doing. The women are the ones in power. They are the one able to, you know, fly these houses, use the magic that is required to do so. And even the big bad is kind of positioned as a bumbling idiot, especially when his parentage is kind of uncovered and his whole misogynistic argument is just completely destroyed by it. And the adventurous plot was entertaining and fast-paced and moved quickly, and the romance was equally as fun. I will say that there is a lot of distractions going on in the plot, so it took me a little while to realize what was happening in the romance, but once I was in, I was sold. It is a cinnamon bun romance with the main guy falling first. It is incredible. He pursues her for the rest of the book, and she's really in this position where she has to decide whether she wants to continue on with her life in the society that she's always dreamed of having, or she wants to go out on her own and live a life of scandal with Ned Lightbourne. And the way she makes that decision in the end, I think, is really beautiful, and I would recommend this book 100%. Then we've got The Deal by Elle Kennedy. So as the first book in the off-campus series, this particular book follows Hannah Wells and Garrett Graham. Hannah Wells has a trauma in her past that's kind of always gotten in the way when it comes to pursuing relationships and having sex, essentially. And so she decides that she's going to get the help of the sort of college bad boy and hockey superstar Garrett Graham in order to raise her social standing and get the attention of her crush. Garrett, however, is absolutely flunking out of school. His GPA is so low that it's beginning to threaten his position on the hockey team, so he agrees to help Hannah because she agrees to help him raise his GPA. Only for one unexpected kiss and a night of a wild passion that neither of them expected to really throw Garrett's mind for a loop and have him set on convincing Hannah that the man that she should really be pursuing looks a lot more like him. It is definitely a guy falls first. It is definitely a cinnamon bun hero, and I really love this book. But a big part of why I recommend it to you is because it was just fun. It wasn't anything deep. It wasn't a masterpiece in the way it was written. It was just a fun read that explored the traumas that the characters had gone through in their past in enough of a way that felt like it wasn't disrespecting those traumas and those situations and people who have actually experienced those sorts of things. I would recommend checking out the trigger warnings before picking up this book, because there are a few things that if you're not comfortable with facing them, you definitely shouldn't read this. But because it was so fun and because it wasn't particularly deep or moving in any kind of way, it was so easy to get lost in the angst and the tension of their relationship, in the will they won't they, in the pining that Garrett was feeling. I love the way that the side characters got enough personality that it had me really interested in reading the follow-up books in this series, which follow each of them. And I would recommend picking up the rest of the series after you read this one, because each book after it is equally as fun, equally as, you know, not particularly masterpiecey. They are just a really fun series that I think everyone should give a go. Next up, we've got Love on the Brain by Elle Hazelwood. This is the second book in Elle Hazelwood's Steminist Novellas series, and it follows B. Konigwasser, who is offered her absolute dream job at NASA as a sort of neuroscience engineer for a top secret project, only to find out that her co-lead is her arch nemesis basically from university, Dr. Levi Ward. B. Konigwasser joins this team and quickly finds out that she is not welcome, because it is a very male heavy team and they are not interested in helping her set up her computer or fixing the problems that she's having with her keycard or backing any of her ideas, despite the fact that she is the expert that was brought in to consult. These men seem to constantly be shutting her down and belittling her expertise, and naturally she is absolutely fed up with it, thinking Levi is really the leader of this whole misogynistic group, only to realize that Levi is slowly backing her ideas more. He's voicing her corner, he's supporting her, he's getting the issues with her computers and her keycard fixed, and it really makes her question every belief that she had that he hated her, and also makes her question on what side of the very thin line between love and hate she falls. A big part of the reason why I recommend this one is the same as The Deal. It's fun, it's sort of fanficky in the way it's written, so it definitely feels like the good old days of Wattpad, so it's just an enjoyable read where you can get lost in the angst and the tension. But I really enjoy the way it explores being a woman in a very male-based workplace and the difficulties that that can present in terms of fitting in terms of getting your voice heard. I think that's a really important topic to be discussing with people in a very accessible way, and books like this are the sort of entrance point for a lot of people in making them aware of what happens in these very male-based careers and workforces and teams. I loved how sure in her feminist beliefs Bea was, but I also loved that she felt relatable in the fact that she still got anxiety and still really stressed about voicing her opinions and fitting in with this team, and it would sort of manifest in this word vomit thing that she would do whenever she got really nervous. Of course, I loved Levi. He was an absolute cinnamon bun of a hero who definitely had been harboring feelings for Bea for a really long time, but was never able to tell her about them for reasons that I'm not going to get into because it would be a spoiler. The sexual tension between these two characters was just palpable. You could cut it with a knife, and the read was just so addictive. So I loved this book and I would really recommend it if you haven't read it already. I'd also recommend its prequel, The Love Hypothesis, but I feel like everybody's heard of that one. Next up, we have a book that I read on KU, and that is Heartless by Elsie Silver, which is again a second book in a series, but this one I'm annoyed because I read this book only to find out after I'd finished it that it was part of a series, and I had to go back and probably read the first one before continuing with the series, and to be honest, probably do a reread of Heartless. Oh no. You know, I'm totally fine with that because I loved this book so much. As for what it's about, it follows Cade, who is a single father raising his young son Luke on a farm, and he's kind of trying to find a nanny for his son so he can focus on looking after the farm, but is finding that all the women he's interviewing are way more interested in him than they are in looking after his son. So naturally, he's on the brink of giving up, and he goes to his family for advice, and they suggest to him that he brings on Willa, who I believe is a friend of his sister-in-law. Willa is a bit of a free spirit. She's floating around. She doesn't really know what she wants to do with her life, and she's offered this opportunity and a 2-month contract to make a bit of money with no commitment, and she absolutely dives in, only to find that after a wild game of truth or dare in a hot tub, she has a lot more than just platonic feelings for Cade and a really motherly love of his young son Luke as well, and begins to think that this 2-month project looks a lot more like forever. I absolutely love a Grumpy Sunshine romance, and this was a really perfect example of a Grumpy Sunshine romance done well because the hero was truly grumpy and the heroine was truly a ray of sunshine, and they didn't really make each other change in any kind of way. Like, Cade remained grumpy. He was lovable and had a heart of gold and was beautiful, and when he was with his son he was an absolute cinnamon bun, but he remained a grumpy hero. He remained kind of jaded, and Willa kind of remained this free spirit, but she just became a little bit more grounded. I love that Willa was very, very passionate, and she would go to bat for anyone that she felt loyal towards, especially Luke, and the scenes where she acted in almost a motherly way were really, really moving. And I was honestly really, really surprised by the very different approach to the third act conflict that this story took. It definitely included a trope that I know a lot of people feel like very Marmite about it, or Vegemite because I'm Australian, but the way that it included the trope, they removed sort of the angst and the drama from it and made it all about these two characters needing to take time away in order to come to terms with what had happened and accept the way it was going to change their lives before they could come back together. And it felt like a really, really mature approach to the third act conflict, especially because there was already a kid involved in Luke, and so you couldn't do the big blowout thing that a lot of third act conflicts do because there's a kid. Like, you can't do that to a kid. And as for the kid, Luke was absolutely adorable. He was a character in himself, which I loved. He didn't feel like just an added element to the plot that was shoved in to add a bit more angst. He was an actual character himself. He was built, he had moments on his own with each of the main characters, and he was just adorable. I love it. I just want to give him a hug, wrap him up in a ball, and just like cuddle him because he'd be so cute. But anyway, I recommend this book 100%, and I'm going to continue with the rest of the series, so probably recommend that too, but TBC on that front because I haven't read them yet. And lastly, we've got Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail by Ashley Herring Blake. This is again a second book in a series, but I will say that every time I recommend a second book in a series, it is a series where you can read each of the books on their own and not be sort of out of the loop or anything. Like, this one can stand on its own. I will say if you read it first before you read the first book, it will give away some elements of the plot of the first book, but outside of that, it does stand on its own. But anyway, as for what it's about, it follows Astrid Parker, who, after her life kind of imploded in the first book, Delilah Green Doesn't Care, she's basically having a mental breakdown every which way from Sunday, until one day she's offered a supreme opportunity to be on a hit interior design show all about redesigning an old inn in her neighborhood with the help of the family, especially because the daughter of the family or granddaughter of the family that owns this inn is going to be the carpenter on the show. So Astrid takes up the opportunity, thinking it's the perfect moment to revive her reputation and get her career moving again, only to find out that she is constantly coming to head with the carpenter on the show because the carpenter disagrees with every single decision that she's making as it relates to interior design. The showrunners, sensing the obvious tension, ask Astrid and the carpenter, Jordan, to play it up a little bit for the audience, and so they do, only to find that the tension that they're feeling between each other is maybe a little less hatred and angst and a little more sexual and romantic. These two women face a growing attraction for each other that they have to keep completely secret from the producers because it would potentially make this whole show implode, just like Astrid's life did before this book began. So why do I recommend this book? Firstly, Ashley Herring Blake has a real skill for making really, really relatable characters who are going through really tough life situations, but also not like astronomical stuff that would never actually happen. It is real situations that you can experience in your life, and really delving into those situations before anything happens in the sort of romance department. Like, you get a lot of time individually with Astrid and with Jordan, learning about them, figuring out what their complications are in their life before any sort of relationship starts up between them. And you really appreciate that because, one, it made me feel really more connected to the two characters, and it made me more invested in their romance. It made me want them to be happy, but also it made them feel more real. Outside of that, I think Astrid and Jordan are probably among my favorite romance couples. They are a beautiful couple that really is all about supporting each other, being there for each other, doing what they can in order to promote each other. And then once the relationship did grow, I love how it really impacted both of them in a really positive way and encouraged them to pursue things that they'd never really considered before or weren't confident enough to pursue previously. The one thing that I will say about this book is that sometimes Ashley Herring Blake can really toe the line between being authentic and authentically including social commentary and being a little bit preachy and a little bit lectury. And there were a few moments in this story where I felt like there were inclusions that really weren't necessary. But all in all, I really do recommend this book, and I recommend all 5 books on this list. They are amazing. So those are 5 romance recommendations for you based on books that I have recently read. Like I said in my fantasy recommendations list, I'm going to release a new video like this every single time I have 5 more books to talk about, so expect more of these from me in the future. But do let me know in the comments down below if there are any books that you recommend, or if you've read any of these books and would agree or disagree with my thoughts on them. I love chatting to you guys, and I do my best to reply to every single comment. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please do let me know by liking, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell all down below. It's a super easy way